My ex-fiancée slept with my brother the night before our wedding.
Now, 12 years later, just a week before I'm set to marry someone else, she reaches out.
But this time, I'm not looking for closure. I'm looking for revenge.
12 years ago, I was all set to marry the woman I had been with since high school. We had almost a decade together, and I figured we were solid. We had even been living under the same roof for 5 years by then, so marriage felt like the natural next step.
My parents loved her. My buddies liked her. My family was happy as hell when I popped the question. Everything was lining up just right. But then, the night before the wedding, she went and slept with my brother. My own brother. She had this whole plan about how we should not see each other the night before the wedding because of some nonsense about bad luck, so I booked a hotel like she wanted. A couple of hours after I checked in, I realized I left my shoes at home. Not just any shoes, my wedding shoes, the ones I had been excited about for months. So I drove back. I walked in and noticed the living room lights were off, which was weird because she never turned the lights off when she left her room. I did not think much of it, just headed straight to the bedroom, because that is where I had left my shoes. I opened the door, and there they were. My brother and my fiancée, right in our bed, too caught up in what they were doing to even notice I was standing there. For a few seconds, I was frozen like my brain could not catch up to what my eyes were seeing. Once it hit me, I bolted. She was yelling my name, but I was already gone. I jumped in my car, drove back to the hotel, chest tight, hands shaking, barely able to breathe. I just sat there trying to convince myself I must have seen it wrong. It took a while to get a grip, and when I finally calmed down enough, I just sat there and cried until I could not cry anymore. She must have figured out where I was, or maybe she was just texting me nonstop hoping I would respond. Either way, my phone lit up with her texts, all these half-assed apologies and excuses. It was a one-time mistake, she said. The wedding pressure was too much, she said.
My brother had always been a shoulder to cry on.
None of it mattered.
I blocked her right then and there.
Blocked my brother too.
I was not in the mood for either of their sorry excuses. It took a while to get myself together, but I canceled the whole wedding first thing. Did not matter how much money went down the drain, I was not walking into that mess. 10 years down the toilet, so what was a few $1,000 compared to that? Then I called my parents, told them everything. They were stunned, had no idea whether to be pissed at him or worried about me. I gave them some space to process it, ordered myself some sad dinner, and cried myself to sleep. I only ever saw her twice after that. First time was when she came to pack up her stuff and move out. Second time was at some mutual friend's party a couple of years later. She tried to talk to me, but I was out the door the second I saw her face.
Me and my brother, we never spoke again after that night. My parents cut him off too.
Last I heard, he was somewhere in Europe and had not been back home for years. That whole mess was buried for over a decade.
I moved on. Met someone better. Built a good life. I am with a woman I actually trust, a woman I love, and we are about to get married in less than a week. And then, out of nowhere, my ex pops back up. She found me somehow, probably through Facebook, even though I had her blocked. Made a new account and started spamming me with all these pathetic messages about how she was heartbroken to hear I was getting married again. She kept saying again like we had actually been married, which we never were. It felt like some bad rerun of my life, her begging me to take her back and talking like I was the love of her life, like none of that betrayal had ever happened. It got under my skin more than it should have. I told my fiancée about it right away, and she got it. She had been cheated on before too, not in a 10-year relationship like mine, but enough to know the sting. Part of me just wanted to unload on my ex and tell her exactly where to shove her sob story, but another part of me, the part that had been holding on to that pain for 12 years, wanted revenge. Real revenge. The kind that would make sure she would never dare crawl back into my life again. My fiancée, she was all in. Said I deserved some payback after everything I went through. So we put our heads together and came up with a plan. A couple of hours after my ex messaged me, I responded. Told her I was ready to talk. She was all excited,
wanted to come over right away, but I told her to get a hotel room nearby, said it would be easier to talk somewhere private.
My fiancé was sitting right next to me the whole time.
The next day, I showed up at the hotel at the time we agreed on. My ex opened the door with this big, teary smile like she had been waiting for me forever. She sat me down, grabbed my hands, started spilling her guts about how sorry she was and how she had been miserable for 12 years, waiting for a chance to make things right. Said she had only reached out because she heard I was getting married again and knew this was her last shot to win me back. I sat there nodding along, pretending to care, just watching the clock.
20 minutes later, right on cue, there was a knock at the door.
I got up, opened it, and in walked my fiancé, followed by all our groomsmen and bridesmaids. Every single one of them was wearing a mask with my brother's face on it. They even brought a cake with my brother's grinning face printed right on top. My ex's smile disappeared so fast you would have thought someone flipped a switch. She just stood there, mouth open, unable to say a word.
We all yelled surprise like it was her birthday party.
The hotel staff did not even question it since she had already told them to let her visitors up, thinking it would just be me.
But I had other plans.
She finally snapped out of it and started sobbing, mumbling all kinds of nonsense while the tears poured down her face. I was not about to let her off easy though. She had the nerve to show up after what she did, so now it was her turn to feel humiliated. I told her straight to her face this was exactly what she deserved, and if she honestly thought there was any chance in hell I would take her back, she was even crazier than I remembered. After all the pain she caused me, she had no right to contact me, and I was glad she was hurting because she earned every bit of it. She kept crying, said if I did not want her back, I could have just ignored her instead of setting her up like this. But I did not feel bad for her, not then and not now. I told her to stay out of my life for good and left her sitting there, bawling her eyes out in that hotel room. Got it? Here's your fully reworked version of this part of the story, written in the voice of a simple American man, prepared for artificial intelligence voiceover, with the same details but at least 60% different wording and structure, all abbreviations written out, and everything in one breath with no paragraph breaks. My buddies have known me forever, so when they found out what I did to my ex, they were not shocked one bit. They were actually proud of me for finally standing up for myself after all the hell she put me through. They remember how messed up I was back then, how I barely crawled out of that hole she and my brother shoved me into, so they figured she deserved everything she got.
My fiancé's friends, though, that was a whole different story.
I do not think they ever really understood the full picture, and honestly, I do not think they wanted to. They were probably hoping for some cheesy reality show kind of drama they could laugh about later, but this was real life for me, and the pain she caused was not some joke. My fiancé is fully in my corner, says I do not owe that woman a single apology, but her friends are acting like I burned down a church. They straight up told her they are not coming to the wedding unless I say sorry to my ex, like they have any say in what happens in my life. It is putting me in a bad spot because on one hand, I want my fiancé to have the perfect wedding, and I know her friends mean a lot to her, but on the other hand, there is no way in hell I am apologizing to the woman who tore my life apart just because some bridesmaids think I should. She could have stayed out of my life forever, and none of this would even be happening, but she just could not let me move on. Now she is out here acting like she is the victim, sending me sob stories from fake accounts about how I broke her heart and how karma is going to come after me. I am so done with her guilt trips.
I have no time for it, not from her and definitely not from my fiancé's bridesmaids.
I know my fiancé is not going to beg me to apologize, but I can feel it in the air, like part of her wishes I would just for the sake of keeping the peace, and I do not blame her for that.
Still, I have to decide right now what kind of man I want to be.
Update 1. The response I got when people found out what happened has been all over the place. There is just one day left before the wedding, and I figured I better sit down with my fiancé and talk it through before making any final calls, like a lot of folks suggested. When I told her how I was feeling about the whole situation, she did not even hesitate. She said straight up that I do not owe my ex a damn thing, and if her bridesmaids cannot handle that, they are welcome to stay home. She even tried explaining the whole story to them, how my ex and I were together for 10 years, how she cheated on me with my brother right before our wedding, all of it. They still would not budge. They are so convinced I am the bad guy, they would rather miss their best friend's wedding than open their eyes and realize how messed up my ex was.
After trying to get through to them a couple of times, my fiancé gave up. Told them if they could not be there for her, that was their choice. She has not heard a word from any of them in over a day, and at this point, it is pretty obvious they are not coming. One of them even had the nerve to ask for a refund on the bridesmaid dress my fiancé already bought for her, which, honestly, just proves what kind of friends they really are. My fiancé keeps putting on a brave face for me, acting like it does not matter, but I know it hurts. These women have been her friends since they were teenagers. She says it is fine, but I can see right through her. So now I am thinking about reaching out to them myself, seeing if I can talk some sense into them, even though I know they probably will not listen. Meanwhile, my ex is still finding ways to make my life hell. She got a hold of my number somehow, called me out of the blue, and wasted a solid 15 minutes trying to convince me I am still in love with her. She thinks me going out of my way to humiliate her means I must still care. In her mind, hate and love are basically the same thing. That is how twisted she is. And yeah, I do still feel something when I think about her, but it is not love. It is disgust. The only reason I held her hands while she was talking that night was to get her hopes up before slamming her back down. I literally laughed right in her face while she was pouring her heart out, but even that did not get through her thick skull. She kept babbling about fate and soulmates and how I was throwing away my one shot at true love. The only reason I even let her talk is because I am scared of how unstable she has gotten. I do not want her hurting herself over me, not because I care, but because I do not want that kind of guilt on my conscience. I have been trying to get in touch with her parents, hoping they can talk some sense into her, but so far they are ignoring me, so I am just waiting for them to call back so I can wash my hands of this whole mess. I will say this much. I still hate her for what she did, but I do not hate her enough to want her dead. Update 2. So the wedding actually happened. We are officially married now, and I cannot believe I get to call this woman my wife. I should be riding high right now, but there is still this shadow hanging over everything. Her friends, all those girls who were supposed to stand up beside her on her big day, they all bailed. Every single one. I personally called every last one of them, tried to explain why I stood my ground, why I was not going to apologize to my ex, but none of them cared. They made up their minds before I even opened my mouth. Even when I begged them to show up just for my wife's sake, they were not interested. It made no sense to me because I know if the roles were reversed, I would have shown up for my friend even if I hated the person they were marrying. It was not until yesterday that I finally got the truth. My wife admitted she kind of saw this coming all along. Apparently, her friends have always had this weird pact where they all have to agree on everything like some high school clique that never grew up. The second my wife stood up for me instead of siding with them, they turned on her. It did not even matter if I apologized or not. They just did not like that she put me before them. She was pretty embarrassed to admit it, said she felt silly for even being upset, but I could tell it hurt. I told her it was not her fault, because it is not. Her friends are a bunch of spoiled brats who never learned how to act like adults. The crazy part is, my wife even said she feels kind of relieved now. She has been bending over backwards for years trying to fit in with them, constantly worrying about their approval, and now that they are gone, she finally feels like she can just be herself. So in a weird way, it is kind of a win for both of us, absolutely. Here's the fully reworked version of this part of the story, written in the voice of a simple American man, prepared for artificial intelligence voiceover, keeping all the details but making it at least 60% different in wording and structure, no abbreviations, and all in one breath. I finally heard back from my ex-girlfriend's parents the night before the wedding. When I got them on the phone, I was talking so fast I probably sounded crazy myself, but I wanted to make sure they understood just how bad things were. I told them everything, how their daughter had been showing up, how she was acting completely out of her mind, and how somebody needed to step in and get her out of that hotel before she hurt herself or did something even worse. Turns out they had been off on some hiking trip in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, so they had no clue any of this was happening. They promised me they would come grab her right away and actually thanked me for letting them know what was going on. I did not hear anything else after that, so I just assumed they got her out of there and took her home like they said they would. Update 3. So it has been a week since the wedding, and man, it has been non-stop chaos ever since.
Like I mentioned before, after that call with her parents, I figured they had stepped in and taken her home, so I stopped thinking about it.
Apparently, that was a mistake. 2 nights ago, way after dark, somebody knocked on the door.
Me and my wife were sitting on the couch, both of us confused since we were not expecting anybody that late. I made the dumb call to open the door without checking the camera first, and sure enough, it was her.
My ex-girlfriend, standing there with her suitcases like she was moving in.
Before I could even process what was happening, she shoved past me like she lived there and walked right into my house. My wife jumped up off the couch like somebody lit a fire under her, both of us standing there too shocked to even say anything. I was about to ask what the hell she thought she was doing when she cut me off and told me she was staying here now. She said her parents came to get her a few days ago, but she refused to leave because she just knew I was going to take her back once I saw her again.
I could not believe what I was hearing.
My wife was just as stunned, and we stood there looking at each other like this could not actually be happening. My ex went on and on about how her parents tried to drag her home, how they fought about it, and how she ended up staying at the hotel for a few more days until her money ran out, so now her brilliant plan was to move in with me. She really believed that if we spent enough time together, all my old feelings for her would come rushing back and I would realize I still loved her. I swear to God, I had no idea what to do in that moment because nothing about this was normal. My wife tried to speak up, tried to get through to her, but my ex would not even look at her. She just kept talking to me, like my wife did not even exist. She kept saying I needed to let her stay so we could work things out. I did my best to stay calm and told her as gently as I could that I was married now and she could not just show up and move into my house. But she stood there all serious and said the marriage did not count because she did not accept it, so in her mind, I was still single.
I wanted to scream.
I wanted to throw her out right then and there, but honestly, I was scared of what she might do if I pushed her too hard. It was clear something was seriously wrong with her, and no matter how much I hated her for what she did to me, I could not ignore the fact that she needed help. I told her to sit down in the living room while me and my wife went to the bedroom to figure out what the hell we were supposed to do.
Thankfully, my wife is way more understanding than I deserve.
She saw right away that this was not just some pathetic ex still carrying a torch. This was someone who was mentally unwell and needed real help. I called her parents again, but this time they would not even pick up the phone. They finally sent me a message saying they were done trying to force her to come home, that they could not handle her anymore, and that they were washing their hands of her completely. I could not believe her own parents were so embarrassed by her they were willing to just let her fend for herself. With no other option, I called my own parents, and they were at my house within half an hour. While we were waiting, my ex passed out on the couch, which honestly was a blessing because I have no idea how we would have gotten her to go with us if she had been awake. My parents agreed we needed to get her to a doctor immediately because there was no telling what she was capable of at that point. None of us could even bring ourselves to hate her anymore. She was too far gone. All I saw when I looked at her was someone who was completely broken. The next morning, we took her straight to the hospital, and she was still rambling nonsense about how happy she was that I was finally coming around and how she was already planning our wedding like we were just picking up where we left off 12 years ago. When we got to the hospital, they tried to get her to talk to a psychiatrist, but she flat out refused and said there was nothing wrong with her. It took some convincing and, honestly, a little medication to calm her down enough to even get her in the room. After a few hours, she seemed a lot more stable, and all of a sudden, she said she was ready to go home. I did not know if she meant her parents' house or somewhere else, but either way, I just wanted her out of my house. My wife and I helped her gather up her stuff, loaded it into the car, and drove her back to her parents' place. The whole ride was dead silent.
None of us knew what to say.
When we got to her house, she actually apologized to both of us, said she knew she caused a lot of trouble and felt ashamed about all of it. It was probably the most normal thing she had said in days. Me and my wife told her we hoped she would get the help she needed and that we wanted her to be okay, then we left her there and drove home. I did not know if it would do any good, but I called her mother after we got home and filled her in on everything, made sure she understood just how bad things had gotten. Her mom said she was moving in with her daughter to make sure nothing like this happened again.
She even promised to keep us updated.
As much as I hate everything that happened between us, And no matter how much pain she caused, I still hope she gets better.
Nobody deserves to end up like that.